Chris says, good healthcare and healing requires participation and responsibility on our part. Agreed. What do you have to say to that?
Yeah, I agree. Having to be your own advocate for your healthcare. Yes, your doctor's opinion is important, but you have to sign on and agree. And if it's not something that you're driving with, being able to do some research and come up with a plan with your family, with your healthcare providers that's going to work for you.
So, what is it that you specifically want to see different going forward?
I would say more a compassionate system that doesn't prioritize insurance plans for the type of care that people receive. I've been in hospital settings, in treatment team meetings where the first question isn't what's their diagnosis, what's their condition. It's by far and large that what's the insurance provider? And then that dictates the framework where we start making the decisions. And I don't think that's right.
Yeah, so it's interesting. I recently learned that other countries don't permit specific chemicals to be in the food and water supply. And why? Because those chemicals are impairing and disrupting your innate nervous system, right? Causing mental health conditions, emotional distress, and then eventually, disease, a greater form of disease. So their healthcare system is paid for by the government. So the government actually has an incentive to keep them healthy, like out of the doctor's office and maybe at the farmer instead.
That's a really intriguing point, that there's a reason that our system would want to keep our people healthy. And when CEOs of healthcare companies make $60 million a year on sick people, I think we should have a problem with that.
Mic drop. Boom. I just want to say this, and I'm hearing that somebody needs to hear this. Someone who's listening to the show either now or will be catching the replay, I hear. You either have an addiction or had an addiction in the past, and you've been blaming yourself for this for a long time. And God is telling me to tell you it's not your fault. He would like me to connect the dots for you. And here's what's going on. So when mom and dad had babies, they were eating foods that had chemicals in it. And so that's what was used, that's how you were formed, with these chemicals that were not good for. And I know that in our mental health community, people talk about addictions and a child who is born to crack or a mother of alcohol, that the child needs to go through a detox process. And this is true. What I'm here to tell you is that any child born today, or even 2 decades ago, mostly 3 decades ago, 4 decades ago, who is consuming conventional food also needs to go through a detox process. This is not your fault. But now that you have awareness, it's your responsibility to take care of it. I believe that's complete. Do you have anything to contribute to that, Danielle?
There's absolutely a lot of research behind. I'm not going to argue with God. I'm not going to do that. But I'm going to back up what you're saying a little bit about.
Well, I have science on it too. The God message was there was someone who needed to hear it.
Absolutely. And there's just backing that up, that our prenatal and postnatal journey has an impact, and even our parents' environment and what they're going through at that time impacts how we turn out. So there's definitely research behind that. And just backing up, it's no one's fault to have an addiction. It's absolutely crucial to understand that, to take away the guilt and shame that can allow someone to enter treatment and get the most out of it.
So the thing is that we want people to lose the guilt and then just focus on the solution, right? You don't need to carry the guilt. That's a heavy, heavy burden. But if you were to design something like a new healthcare system, what would that look like in your mind's eye?
I think that everybody being on a level playing field is really important, to everyone being able to have access to the treatment that they need. Things like addiction, things like cancer, things like autoimmune disease don't discriminate. So someone from a higher socioeconomic status getting better quality treatment for that disease, it seems unjust. And I guess inequality is a big part. The inequalities and injustices that I've seen, throughout my life, through school, through college, and then, in my early career up till now, I noticed those things, and I can't just put them down or say, oh, I can ignore it. So that's a big part of why I said I wanted to run when I was approached about would I run. So yes, fixing some of those inequalities in the system would be utmost priority for me.
What does that look like though? Like, how would you do it? Because see, for me, I'm just going to tell you, the current system's obsolete. It just doesn't work. I feel like you need to start from scratch. So we need to look at things completely differently. And in kindergarten, start teaching them that eggplants don't come from a grocery store, right? They come from the ground.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, like if you ask a kindergartner or a second grader where the apple comes from, it comes from, the grocery store. They don't know it comes from a tree. And so I think there's the healthcare reform starts with our education system. It starts in book, and honestly, how to balance a checkbook.
Yeah, those skills for living, you have to have them to be able to take care of yourself.
So, I mean, we kind of have to just chuck the current model, don't you think?
Yeah.
Would you agree that technology is not going away?
Absolutely not.
Okay. So one of the things is that I think it's okay to have all this technology. I use it. I love it. It works for me. But let's have laws in place that require technology to be deployed responsibly, because those are hidden toxins, and no one thinks twice about taking this phone and putting it to their ear, and yet it's clumping the red blood cells by their brain. And no one thinks twice about putting the wireless earbud, and yet it's clumping the red blood cells and causing them stress and anxiety in between those times.
That's really interesting. That's not something that I've heard before, so I feel like I'm learning. You're educating me. I'm interested. You'll have to give me some resources so I can look up and do some of my own learning. And
so environmentalhealthtrust.org. So I'm having the founder on my show, and so she has all the science to protect human health and the environment, okay, and explain to people what's happening. Her name is Deborah Davis. She's a PhD, and people just don't realize the health effects of technology. And if that's not good enough for you, I have 2 other books, and they're right here. So this is one. The other one, and so he talks about all this and what it does to the calcium channels in the body. Okay. And there's new research coming out every single day. The other book is called The Invisible Rainbow by Arthur Firstenberg. Okay. And this is the history of electricity. And what he'll tell you is that we didn't have disease states or anxiety, stress, diabetes, cancer prior to electricity. We also didn't have many vision problems prior to electricity because we are electrical beings. And if there's any question whether or not we are electrical beings, all you have to think about if someone has heart failure, if they're getting out those pedals and electrifying you to restart your heart. Yeah, talk about that. So how do you get people to be, first of all, you're right. They have to be ready to hear it. You do something to help them mentally prepare to hear the stuff that's coming their way, because that's a challenge.
Yeah, I'll take from my experiences sitting with people and working through mental health issues or not being really happy with where they are in life and just reevaluating their pathway. There's a skill that therapists use called motivational interviewing. And really it's the framework for how you guide people to help them to be more receptive to whatever that change might be for them. So, if I want to make this change, but I feel kind of ambivalent about it, or I'm on the fence, you can have conversations about that. What's going well for you versus what's not going so well? And do you want to try something different to see if it's going to change that outcome for you? And if people are relatively comfortable, there's minimal motivation for change, as opposed to people who are really sick are probably more desperate to try some of these more homeopathic or non-medicated approaches to treating their bodies.